Hundreds gathering to mourn the death of Lori Gilbert Kay, the congregant shot and killed by a gunman inside a California synagogue over the weekend. The attack is sparking new discussion about social media's role in violence against places of worship. And this morning, new statistics from the Anti-Defamation League show that there were nearly 2,000 attacks last year against Jews and Jewish institutions. Now, that's a small decline from 2017, but it's a big increase from 2016 and 2015. I want to bring in Oren Segal, director of the Anti-Defamation League's Center on Extremism. Oren, thanks for being with us. These numbers just out this morning, and before people celebrate because they're going to see the number of anti-Semitic incidents are down, that's because vandalism is down by a substantial margin, but harassment and assaults, which you also measure, are up from 2017.
Yeah, specifically, the assault numbers are particularly alarming. We've seen a doubling of assaults against Jews, and that includes the shooting in Pittsburgh. And now as we're trying to still understand what happened in Poway, it's clear that attacks or efforts to actually target Jewish communities and the individuals are not going away.
Why? What's happening? What's behind this?
Well, there's multiple factors. One is social media. You have these platforms that essentially act as digital hate groups. Individuals are able to reach and recruit and radicalize others. And frankly, they're signaling back to these communities before they're carrying out these attacks. We saw this in Poway, we saw this in Pittsburgh, and we saw this in New Zealand.
I struggle with blaming social media sometimes for this. And it comes up in all the discussions we have, and we talk about it a lot. And I do understand that it makes it easier to convey messages of hate. But I also think it makes it easy to ignore the roots of anti-Semitism and the fact that if you did away with Twitter and Facebook and all forms of social media immediately, I still think it would be out there.
So anti-Semitism is not something that increases solely because of any one platform. And frankly, the public discussion and the mainstreaming of anti-Semitic tropes and bigotry of all kinds also play a role in people's willingness to not only try to find others who share that hatred, but also try to leverage those conversations and incite each other to violence.
Well, there you go. Because I disagree with John, and we do debate it all the time, because I think it wouldn't be able to be activated without social media, or activated as easily without social media, because we know they do find each other and they get ginned up and they make plans on social media. And so how do you crack down on that? What are the social media platforms doing about that?
Right, that's more important, is what do we do about this? We know that there are more platforms than ever before for people to be able to communicate their hatred. I think it's not unreasonable for users and the public to have expectations of these platforms that they take more efforts and more initiatives to try to create efforts to make it more difficult for extremists to share their hatred.
But just tell me what that would look like, because, you know, Facebook, et cetera, say that they have all sorts of like First Amendment issues where they can't do that. So what's your dream scenario where they would crack down on it?
Listen, it's not a one size fits all. You know, Facebook and Twitter are different than Gab and 8chan. But we know that at the starting point, you have to admit that you have a problem. You have to put the resources in protecting your users from those who seek to weaponize social media. The reality is this: extremists and those who are carrying out these violent activities, they're preparing their social media approach at the same time that they're preparing their weapons.
Oh, that is chilling. But I will say this, Twitter and Facebook, perhaps the reason that 8chan exists is because Twitter and Facebook have made it at least more difficult for people to hate online and publicly. But if you did away with 8chan, there'd be 9chan or 10chan. They'd find a way.
There's always going to be other platforms, but what's the option? Just to give up, not to address it on these platforms? And by the way, it's not just the role and responsibility of the tech industry, and some have made some efforts. It's also government, law enforcement, civil society organizations to call it out. And frankly, it's to recognize what anti-Semitism and extremism is. We can't deny that there's a surge in white supremacy, and we no longer can deny the surge in anti-Semitism.
So historically, when you've seen a spike in anti-Semitism and white supremacy, what is it that has quelled it? What is it that's brought it down in the past?
Yeah, I mean, that's an important question. Yeah. I think part of it is leadership, unequivocally speaking out against hatred wherever it is. And, Deborah Lipstadt has said anti-Semitism starts with the Jews, but it doesn't end with the Jews. I think we need to address other forms of bigotry in order to reduce anti-Semitism as well. And faith leaders of all kinds need to not just figure out ways to come together during times of crisis, but throughout the year, we need to stop people from driving a wedge between these communities.
I have to say, and one of the first things you said I find truly fascinating and troubling, which is the mainlining or mainstreaming of some types of anti-Semitism. And in my lifetime, maybe I wasn't as aware of it when I was a kid, but I don't remember a time in my life when so much of it is so overt and out there. There was this cartoon in the New York Times over the weekend. That wasn't a double entendre. That was a single entendre. That was an anti-Semitic cartoon. And we get statements from our leaders that aren't double entendres either. They're single entendres. They're just flat out anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I would say that was anti-Semitic propaganda. I wouldn't even call it just simply a cartoon.
Yeah.
I mean, but obviously, to your point, also, I think that the words coming from the president need to be stronger. He says that he's against anti-Semitism, and he talks about being against white supremacy, but some of his messages have been confusing.
Listen, I've been doing this work at ADL for 20 years, looking at extremist narratives, how they speak to each other, anti-Semitic tropes. And I don't recall a time in my doing this work that it has become so mainstream where people don't even tell the difference between what is anti-Semitism and what is not.
But that's my point. So stop that.
Again, you have to consistently speak out the way we do and call it for what it is. Defining our terms and educating the public is always critical.
Oren Segal, thanks for coming in. Really interesting discussion. I appreciate it.